Letting David in, and the recording has begun.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, there I am.
So in accordance with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, we are conducting this meeting in a hybrid model, both virtually and in person. The Public Works Commission is conducting this meeting May 11th, 2022 at 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Zoom platform and in person in accordance with the town's policy directive and guidelines issued on April 1st, 2020 and amended on May 7th. I ask that all Public Works Commissioners, town staff, and presenters activate their video and mute their microphone unless they have something to say or are participating in committee dialogue. For members of the public, when I open the meeting to the public comment, in order to be recognized, please use the raise hand option as part of the Zoom platform. Press *9 if you're on a phone, or if you are on Zoom, wave your hands around and Anna will see you and let us know you want to talk. If you are recognized to speak, please state your name and address. As was mentioned at the beginning, this meeting is being recorded and it will be available for later viewing on the town's website. So first agenda item is call to order. I, Jeff Vassar, hereby call this meeting to order. All commission votes will be taken via roll call. We will start with an attendance roll call of commissioners. When I announce your name, please reply. David DeLong.
Here.
All right. Andrea Solomon.
Here.
James Terry. Here. Casey Winslow.
Here.
Jeff Vassar here. So first item of business is review or approval of the meeting minutes from the April 13th, 2022 Public Works Commission meetings. Is there any comments, questions?
I move we approve the minutes of April 13th, 2022.
Thank you.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a roll call vote. David DeLong,
Aye.
Andrea Solomon,
Aye.
James Terry,
Aye.
Casey Winslow,
Aye.
Jeff Vassar, aye. Next item is review our calendar for future meetings.
Very good. I will, Alan Cathcart, Public Works Director. Looking ahead, we have a June meeting. We are planning on doing a solid waste recycling subscription rate hearing. That's what's on the agenda. We're contemplating a discussion on NAGOG, an update on NAGOG. I just haven't finalized that. We generally take the summer off. It's just a couple months, but July and August, we tend not to meet unless there's something pressing and necessary, and then we sort of call a meeting, and we try to keep it to the second Wednesday of the month. But we'll hope things go smoothly and there's no need to reconvene until September. I will put on the radar that in September, maybe late September, there's a chance there may be a special town meeting relating to NAGOG. So that may impact our schedule and might want to look at that a little bit more closely as things firm up. But other than that, that's sort of the immediate look ahead.
Okay, question on the solid waste and recycling. I think I've asked this numerous times. Are we going to have new proposals in, or is this
The roll up
the cost of our current service?
Unlikely. We're likely going to continue service as is.
Yep.
I don't want to give away everything, but there's a strong likelihood that we'll continue service as is with a need to revisit for probably 2 years out.
Okay.
Looks like the reasonable horizon for that.
Okay. Any other questions on the calendar? No. Okay.
Can I just confirm, Dave DeLong here? I just want to confirm then, since I may be chairing these meetings in the fall, those dates are set, the September 14, October 12, November 9, and December 14.
Yes, those are the second Wednesday of each month. And so that's that's our schedule. Dave, sometimes we do need to reschedule depending on availability of all commissioners. And
Right.
we typically kind of work that into, a discussion before, but we can't, we don't meet if there's no quorum. But if there is, these are the dates where we'll plan on.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Next item is the water and sewer rate public hearing. So I believe, Alan, before I turn it over to you, we need to open the public hearing.
I move that we open the public hearing on the water and sewer rates for 2020, effective June 1st, 2022.
Any discussion? No? We'll mix it up here. Casey Winslow.
Aye.
James Terry.
Aye.
Andrea Solomon.
Aye.
David DeLong.
Aye.
Jeff Vassar. Aye. Okay. Alan, turn it over to you.
Very good. Well, I want to introduce Jeff Morosky, our water sewer superintendent. Jeff, you can come up. Jeff is going to give you the overview. I also want to take an opportunity to introduce Nelson Moy, who is in our audience. Nelson is a water sewer management analyst. So Nelson was instrumental in helping pull together a lot of the facts and information, and as well as Bob Hill, who I think is observing remotely. So we have a larger pool here. He might be out in the audience, but
Oh, there he is.
there he is. All right. And so Anna, do I have the ability to share screen? Just
Yes, you do.
okay, great. So let me go into share screen. Pull the. All right, look at this. And we know just in the event there's technical difficulties here, Anna's providing backup hardwired. So we got it covered here, I think. So, all right, Jeff, with that said,
Do you want to minimize the
I will
side?
minimize the side. How's that? Oh, wait. We have two systems here. There we go.
All set?
Mhm.
Right. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Commissioner, Chairman Vassar, members of the commission. As a matter of procedure, the commission received a packet of information that included proposed rates and special service fees for adoption by the Public Works Commission, serving as the Concord Water and Sewer Commission. This information has been disseminated via the town manager's enterprise fund budget book, the finance committee budget hearing, posting in the newspaper of general circulation in Concord, and also posting to the town's website. And before I begin, I would just like to say a thanks and acknowledgement to team members who assisted in both the budget development process and also in the development of the rates hearing documents. Firstly, I'd like to recognize Nelson Moy and Bob Hill assisting in financial billing and rates subjects. Melissa Simoncini, who is assisting in water quality and regulatory matters, and also in graphs development for the presentation. Anna Trout in assisting in advertising the rates hearing. And then lastly, Alan Cathcart assisting in helping me get up to speed in numerous ways and areas. Still a work in progress. This slide, I think tenured commission members will recognize our program objectives have not changed. We've got a lot of regulatory and statutory requirements to comply with, notably Water Management Act and our NIPD's permits, one on the water side and one on the wastewater side. Another objective is achieving high level of customer satisfaction. And our third primary program objective is to provide sufficient supply, not only for the current, but for the future needs of Concord. Regulatory drivers, again, this should look familiar. We have state regulations, federal regulations, emerging contaminants. Cybersecurity has gotten some extra recent attention recently with the war on Ukraine and Russia's propensity for cyber attacks, and also the revised lead and copper rule. This slide is a slide that's been previously presented, and we had a measure of concern with the 2020 year. We had an uptick in the average annual water system demand. This is in millions of gallons. We had 3 successive relatively low years that we believe were reflective of water conservation efforts. And then in the first year of the pandemic, there was an uptick, and there was also drought conditions that was kind of like a perfect storm, people staying home and using more water and not getting as much rainfall on their yards. And it was in 2020 that more conservation restrictions were imposed, and we partly reaped the benefit of that in 2021. Later in the presentation, that 2021 year, this presentation largely mirrors the residential gallons per capita per day figure. You'll see the highs and the lows follow along very well with one another. For water assets or a water system, we have a mixture of surface water supply and groundwater supply. Surface water supply is, of course, Magdog ponds, 6 groundwater wells, 7 pumping stations, 2 treatment facilities, 2 water storage reservoirs, giving us a total of 7.5 million gallons per day storage. Now we've got over 134 miles of distribution mains and over 1,300 hydrants. The valuation of the asset, I'm sorry, Alan, is presently valued at almost 26 million. On the next slide, operation and maintenance. Again, these are similar breakouts that we previously presented. Personnel expenses is the largest single item. The roll up on O&M for water is about 3.4 million. We do account for depreciation in the operation of the enterprise. You'll see it there. It's the second largest item, 27%. And we also do make, on behalf of both water enterprise and sewer enterprise, contributions to the general fund services and support that the enterprise, the water and sewer division receives, town manager's office, HR, finance, and so forth. On the next slide, we have an overview listing of the water fund capital improvement plan. And top of the list is Magdog Improvements, where, as Alan mentioned prior to the opening of the hearing, we'll be pursuing a special town meeting for Magdog. So we are pursuing the finalization of design documents in preparation to put that project out to bid. So that's our number one. We also have a increased water main replacement budget built into the capital plan. We are moving towards a neighborhood replacement, renewal of water mains in the Butternut Circle neighborhood. There is an industry-wide issue with material supplies that could cause us a little bit of trouble, and we may not be able to realize that construction until starting calendar 23. And the total capital improvement plan is just over 3 million. In contrast that with the sewer capital, which will be 1.4 million. And we'll see that in the future slide presentation. This next presentation, again, is a similar presentation we've shown in the past for 10-year operating budget projections. In this case, we have what used to be called total expense for the water enterprise. It's now broken out into operating expense and debt expense. That clarification helps to show what's going on with the net income. You'll see the yellow bars, which represent operating expense, have really a steady, modest rise through the years. It's really the debt expenses that'll be associated with debt payments on capital that are creating that little dip. But then once the debt expenses begins to subside, then the net income starts to recover as we get through out years 29, 30, 31, 32. In this slide, we have a presentation of the 10-year water fund capital plan. And just to hammer home the previous point, you'll notice close to the front or to the left of the graph, years FY24 and FY25, we've got large capital plan spending, which in each year is earmarked at just over 16 million. And this is really associated with the Magdog water treatment facility project. And then beyond that, in the out years, the more modest capital bars, all pretty much at or below 2 million per year, really associated with water mains, assets renewal and replacements. Our customer class profile, this is something that we've shown in previous presentations, and it's actually exactly the same as we have presented it in the FY22 rate hearing. We've got 56% residential, commercial, institutional, and mixed, 24%. Hospital and correctional facilities, Emerson and MCI Concord represent 13%, and then municipal buildings and public schools are a smaller 3%.
Jeff, is this the amount of water used or the amount of number of customers? Or tell me more.
Right, Bob or Nelson might be able to help me on this, but I think this is a reflection of the revenues associated with the accounts.
Okay.
Because the hospital and correctional facilities representing 13%, there's only two entities that make that up.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Bob and Nelson, please correct me if I'm wrong.
It is revenue.
Thank you. As I mentioned before, with the annual water demand numbers, this presentation is the residential gallons per capita day. And what this represents is a calculation of the total metered residential use divided by the number of residents. And this is a metric that Mass DEP requires us to track on an annual basis. The pink line going across the top represents a 10-year average at about 67 gallons per capita day. And as we saw in the annual demand, the residential gallons per capita day decreased from what was a high, and it's more in line now with the previous 3 years, 17, 18, and 19. This graph presents seasonal water demand, and this is actually a different picture and largely a better picture than what we looked at last year. The pink line represents a 5-year average. In last year's presentation of the same information, we had a June usage, which was exceeding the 5-year average for that month use. In this case, we were entering into the 2021 year with a water use restriction in place that was helping to control the usage. And then we had the benefits in the summer months of getting some rain relief that would help to mitigate against water uses, non-essential water uses. So we ended up having July, August, September with usages that were below the 5-year average. This brings us into the sewer piece or the wastewater piece, and we'll roll up at the end with the actual rates. So we're not doing water and rates and then sewer and rates. We'll present all of them at the tail end. This slide presents the wastewater assets. Sewer system valuation is just over 17 million. The biggest single asset is the advanced wastewater treatment plant. And we have 2 large-scale pumping stations. One is right outside the window here, our Lowell Road pump station, and then, of course, Assabet. We've got 6 smaller neighborhood lift stations, and then about 34 miles of collection main. And the commission will remember that only about 1/3 of town is sewer serviced, whereas about 95% of the town is water serviced. The next pie chart slide presents the O&M for the wastewater side. And this does look somewhat similar to the water picture. In this case, again, depreciation is the single biggest fraction, representing 33%. The next biggest is actually the wastewater management contract. We did execute a O&M contract with Woodard & Curran. I believe that was executed in January of this year. And one of the first tasks that we'll be assigning to Woodard & Curran outside of conventional operation and maintenance duties is a facilities plan that'll look at the next 10 years and what we'll need to turn our attention to for improvements or upgrades at the treatment plant. Total operations and maintenance expense rolls up to about 3.4 million. And just as a frame of reference, the water O&M was 5 million. Next slide is a tabulation presentation of the capital improvement plan. In this case, the top item is a very expensive and very important vehicle replacement. This is our jetter Vector. This piece of equipment is used for the cleaning of the sewers primarily, but it's also secondarily used to perform trenchless excavation. We're able to jet the soil media with the jetter and vacuum out the soil media. And this helps protect our delicate assets. Sometimes our sewers are in excess of 100 years. I saw that on Hubbard Street. Also, it helps us to negotiate around gas mains and other buried infrastructure. Station and structure improvements, inflow, infiltration, all told, the capital improvement plan for the FY23 year rolls up to about 1.4 million. And for a frame of reference, again, water capital was 3.1. The next slide looks at a bar graph projection of the 10-year operating expenses for the plant. In this case, by virtue of not having had a major capital improvement project since 2007, which probably would have been a borrowing capital project, there's very little remaining debt expense on the wastewater operation budget. There is, again, the biggest ticket is depreciation, and we are slightly outpacing expenses with revenues, giving us a little bit of a dip on net income when we get outwards to fiscal year 27 and 28 before it begins to recover in fiscal 30 and 31. We will take a harder look at the rates and see if a different rate. We have maintained, not to tease out and spoil the slide for the wastewater rates, but we have maintained a 2% rate increase for several years now, and we may look at a adjustment on that in the future years. Next slide is the 10-year capital plan on the wastewater front. And you can see that we're beginning with a very sizable fund balance with small capital expenditures planned. We are planning some capital work in 25, 26, 27, and we'll really dig into the details of this with the facility plan that I mentioned previously with Woodard and Curran, and that'll better map this out for us, both in terms of scale and timing. And this brings us to presentation of rates, and we begin with the FY23 residential water rates. We do have a stepped form of rates that are really designed to help mitigate against unnecessary water use in the warm weather, high demand periods. So the base step is $0.0677 per cubic foot, representing all steps in residential represent a 4% increase over the FY22. What that means to the customer, the average projected residential water bill would be for fiscal 23, $609 per year. And the impact on the average residential customer will be approximately $23.40 per year. And we do expect that the discount rate of 0.0339 to result in savings of up to $244 per year per customer. The next slide is a combination of two groupings of general service rates pertains to the commercial accounts. Again, we have stepped rates, whereas the residential rates is really geared around the warm weather months and mitigating against outdoor water use. The stepped rates for the commercial accounts is year-round. In this case, again, as it was with the residential accounts, the numbers presented represent a 4% increase. Bottom half of the slide touches on municipal service water rates. In this case, again, it represents a 4% increase, and it is slightly lower than the first step proposed adjustment. We do have a heightened level of control of our municipal peers where these accounts are represented. So if we were to go into a water restriction area where we had to help control seasonal water demand, we'd have a lot more control of municipal accounts cooperating with us. This slide presents the sewer rates. These rates are higher than water rates, although that is quite common. It is a little bit more of a costly operation to transport and treat wastewater, more so than water. And there is also a smaller customer base that are supporting the overall operation of the wastewater enterprise. In this case, as I teased out before, these increases are a 2% increase, staying in line with recent past years and what was put forward through the FY23 budget process. And we also are holding pat on the sewer improvement fee, keeping it level with the FY22 figure of $40.07 per gallon. And all this means to the customer, the average projected residential sewer bill will be approximately $741 per year, and the impact on average residential customers about $14.52 per year. And with that slide, this next one brings up the summary sheet, which was distributed to the commission members and made available to the public in advertisement. So 21 sides, pretty quick. I'm not sure how that compares with the Allen Cathcart rate. I'm sure there's some things I missed. But I may need some assistance from my team. Open to any questions from the commission or from the public.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Start with the commissioners. Any comments, questions?
I have a bunch,
Go for it.
but I'll wait for others to go first. Okay.
Go for it, Jim.
Okay. In the memo that Jeff, you sent out that Ellen put in our packets, a question: how many customers are not current on their bills? Do you have a sense of that?
I believe Nelson and Bob may have looked into that question. Nelson, could you speak to it?
Yeah, so every November, the light plan actually has a list of customers that we have to name. Because the light plan doesn't charge a late fee or late interest on delinquent water accounts. So once a year, they put out a lien list for customers, and I'm happy to report that on the water side, as of late last year, there was only 17 accounts that were liened, and that only totaled just under $7,000. And on the sewer side, there was only 3 accounts. So the customer group at the light plan do a fantastic job of trying to collect everything that's owed to water and sewer. So I'm happy to report that the list of accounts in arrears is very, very small.
That's great. I didn't expect that there was too many, but there was a comment about it in the report. Next question: how many customers exceed 300 gallons a day during the winter? Because 300 gallons a day is the tipping point between the first rate level and the second rate level in the summer. So how many people would exceed that in the wintertime, if any?
So at the moment, we don't have that reporting capability to sort of quickly get a list of accounts that hit that threshold. I don't think it's many, to tell you the truth, because on a monthly basis, follow all the high usage accounts. And I don't see many that honestly hit that threshold, but that's a reporting function that we're trying to get with NISC, but currently we don't have that capability readily available to us to get that information.
Okay, thanks. I got more.
Go for it.
And SSA, I can't remember what SSA stands for right now.
That is a seasonal sewer allowance.
Right, okay. So the sewer is calculated in the winter time over the 6-month period of time. And that's what's charged during the summer, because some of the users who have sewers might water outside, and they didn't want to charge sewer rates for water that wasn't going to go through the treatment plant. So the question I had was, is it calculated electronically, or do you have to do it by hand?
So the answer to that, it's a combination of both. Most of the accounts are calculated by the system automatically.
Great.
It's a calculation that's based off of the 6-month average, and the system can do that on its own. But there is a exception report where outliers are spit out from the list of customers.
I didn't want staff to have to be spending a whole lot of time to actually do this, so that's good to know.
But I'm actually the one that does the manual calculation. For the outliers, I'm happy to report it's not a whole lot. Out of the 1,800 or so sewer accounts, you're probably looking at maybe 200 to 300 that I sort of manually do. And the reason for that is because the system felt it was an outlier. It was a certain percentage above or beyond the previous year's usage. So I look at the data, and from there I manually calculate the seasonal sewer allowance for those accounts.
And it's important to understand why. Some people may be snowbirds, or they go away for a month in the winter. They may be newer customers, so there's change in property, that sort of thing. So, the algorithm does the work, and then the exception report is what Nelson will spend time on.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dave.
I'm sorry, I probably missed this, but how did the new rates and the average sort of increase per year compare to the previous recent years? What's the trend line look like?
So it gives a good opportunity. I like to tell people, before we had a real legitimate 10-year performer, when I first got here, Tony Legalbo was a finance director, kind of recognized across the state, for just having fiduciary, skills above most. He volunteered, if we don't have a plan, you need to go up 5% a year, just as a default. Once we got a plan, we were able to revise that. And then we looked at, for the most part, when we first started this operation with a director, Bill Edgerton, I think we went up water 15%. We had a plan, we realized we needed more money, we went up 15%. Since then, we typically target between 3 to 5%, depending on the capital needs. And that's pretty standard. And I think we are looking at, right now, the 4% is, we project over the next 10 years is, 4, maybe 5% based on our capital and operating needs. On the wastewater side, as Jeff mentioned, we've been on the lesser side of 2%, primarily because we haven't had major capital investment. When we in 2007, we put a lot of money in the treatment plant. But we are looking with the facility plan that we do at the treatment plant to really understand, are we in the right target? We may, if we need to adjust, we don't want to have a rate shock. If we go to 3, 4, 5% in wastewater next year, I wouldn't be surprised. But that's really the what we target, between 3 to 5%.
So it's right in whatever the range has been.
It's been in the range. And again, we pride ourselves in having the ability to map out both our use and expenses, including debt, so we can make sure it is a gradual adjustment.
last year's rate was a 10% increase, was it not?
Yeah, last year was significant on the water side.
Right.
And that was an exception because we knew we needed money and funds to go to two things. To pay off debt for the Magdog, as well as we had a target replacement we're looking at about 1.5 miles of water main to replace a year. And there's a rule of thumb about 1 million gallons a mile. So we needed to build in, and this is predictable. So we want to make sure that it's not an unusual expense. And because it's predictable, we target around 1.5 million a year for water main replacement. I think we'll reach that in a couple of years. But again, because we use the tool, so we can kind of forecast and then look at our rates, look at the demand. Another thing I'd say on demand projection for water, there's an assumption that we're looking for a modest decrease in use. The reason is we still believe there's opportunities with conservation, especially during the summer, that hasn't been realized yet. And one of the concerns is going to be regulations will require that we get a little bit more vigilant with our demand management strategy during the summer. So we're really trying to educate. We started with the May 1st with our volunteer water conservation. It's messaging. I often get concerned when we give best practices 1 inch of water a week for your yard. That's not a mandate. We're not telling you have to, but if you're going to, that should be reasonable. Sometimes people say, "Oh, I got a water now." Oh, that's not our message. And we're still trying to figure out the right pattern. But our working assumption is conservative, that we don't want to over forecast that we're going to be selling all this water and making all this revenue. That would not be a good model. So,
Thank you. Thank you.
Anything else, David?
No, all set. Thanks.
I'll let Jim.
Okay, minimum bills. I'm interested in that. The minimum bill, it works out to be 100 gallon or 100 cubic feet. I'm not sure. I get confused with it.
yeah. I do too.
It's whatever it is. So the minimum bill differs by category. Does that make sense? I mean, I'm going to go back to CMLP, because I've been involved with them. They have a lot of fixed costs to provide electricity. And the meter, they call it the meter charge, but it's the fixed fee that gets charged every month. And then on top of that, you get charged for how much electricity you use. For our water and sewer, we don't have a fixed fee that covers the fixed costs that we have for those services. So that when I got to see that minimum bills were different for different categories, I said, should we think about it? Not necessarily for this year, but I think we ought to think about it for the future. How do we recover our costs?
It's an interesting question, and I'm just looking at the details as we look. The minimum bill in the rate, so the schedule of rates that you actually are going to vote on is in detail, and it gives each class and a description of who qualifies, what the rates are. The minimum bill is set at the same. I'm looking just quickly through, it's $677 per month. The reason is, and Jim, you're correct, is to cover the administrative costs of just issuing a bill and processing and having Nelson look at the exception to say what's going on. So,
but when you get to 22-5,
yeah,
the minimum bill is different.
let's look at that.
And when you get to, so it does differ.
I can see the second meter service
Is something different, yeah.
Something different.
So I don't think it's something that I'm going to worry about for this rate hearing, but I think it's something that we ought to think about for.
I think it's a good question. And for clarification, there's not a lot of second meters, and often they're related to construction and that sort of thing. And so we have to look at that. I want to make sure I understand it, because second meters often require that we're doing visits to sites to actually put eyes on it. So it's a good comment, but I think for the most part, the majority of our customers, the minimum bill is simply administrative cost to send the bill out.
If that's what we think
Yeah.
is appropriate,
Yeah,
then I think that's
exactly.
fine.
Yeah.
One more thing, and then I'll be quiet for a little while. When we're talking about the new meters that are going to be coming, CMLP is going to allow certain customers to opt out of the new meters and to have an old meter. Have you heard of that? And what is the impact from the water side?
Okay, so I may turn it over to Nelson, but a couple things on, just so everybody understands with the water customer, water sewer, electric broadband. So a few years ago, we've always partnered with the municipal light plant to get the value and benefit of one. It started with having one person show up at your property and, you know,
Look at
bring
all
the
the
flashlight out down in the basement, and, you know, you didn't want, well, didn't someone just come to my house last week? So they combined the meter reading pool. We then went from a manual read to automated reads, but they would then drive in a van around and collect data from municipal light, water, sewer. And now we've introduced broadband. And so right now we generally partner with them where we're looking at the technology that can read the meters. I bemoan the fact that the municipal light is sort of the, I don't know how to put it. They have certain needs that drive the bus a little bit more than the water and wastewater side. So the technology that we tend to adopt is heavy towards electric utility implementation. And we always find we're trying to, you know, they're still trying to figure out what gallons are versus kilowatt hours. And, you know, it's forever a challenge for us. But the opting in and out of the read deals with, I think, the radio frequency issues and that
Correct.
sort of thing. So we will be, Nelson, I don't know, you've been reviewing sort of recent upgrades. Is there any comment you want to offer to, you know, that opt out, I would imagine is going to be common for, you know, a customer, no matter what the enterprise.
Yeah, so that is gonna be an option. You can opt out of, you know, radio reads. We haven't quite figured out what that would look like. There may be a additional charge perhaps, because instead of, you know, because the new technology, we won't need trucks anymore. It's all gonna be, you know, radio based. You know, there's gonna be routers and certain stations installed throughout town in strategic locations to be able to do that automatic reading. But for the folks that want to opt out, I think we are considering a adder fee each month because we need to physically send someone out to actually get that reading.
Right, that's what the light plant is thinking about also.
Yeah, and we partner with them. And again, it's Concord, same customers. We kind of are mindful of the needs, impact, and that sort of thing. So, and we are literally looking at an upgrade. Nelson's been part of a team, Bob Hill as well, of evaluating, you know, vendors who are going to provide this next level of automation. It's, you know, there's questions as far as when we talk about real-time data, you know, we may have limitations, you know, for water sewer based on the platform. It may not be real time, but it may be at least every 24 hours. There could be sort of a, you know, broadcast of information. And so we're trying to look at that technology to allow people to, one, get better information quicker if they need an alarm, you know, a leak of some sort. You know, those would be exception sort of alarms. And then if they really just want to look at their own account, make it convenient, a portal in so they can kind of see how's the use, you know, this month versus this month last year and that sort of thing. And that's sort of where we're still bundling that together and don't quite have it yet, but we're on track for that.
Are the current final readings done in person?
Depending on the technology, I don't think so. I think they
so.
literally
That's
just,
Really?
yeah.
Yeah.
It might be just a route of final reads and it's
Yeah.
still, it's a van with equipment that goes around.
I see. Okay.
Nelson's talking about technology with routers and repeaters and things like that. We just eliminate the need to actually have a van with technology.
Amazing, huh?
Yeah.
Couple more. Under the residential service, we have 3 levels. The first step is 100, second step is 110% of the first step. And the third step is like 176% of the first step. I'm surprised that it isn't more, it isn't double. And so my first question, my real question is, do we have many customers that get over, or that use over 2,400 cubic feet a month?
We do see a decent handful during the summer months. They have pretty sophisticated irrigation systems. So they do use quite a bit, and the monthly bills and those are pretty expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and it's a great point. This is what we want to do in a perfect world is provide service that people want. It's not necessarily what they need. What they need is a base level, and that's what everybody's provided. We need to make sure that happens. But when there is, I consider it some flexibility, it's more of a, we'd like to have unlimited water. Well, you're gonna have to pay for that. And there's a balance of the price signal in Concord. I say for the most part, you know, we're still trying to find out where is that pressure point where people will change behavior. And in some cases, with properties that are valued at, you know, millions of dollars, you know, the cost to maintain is simply just, you know, part of the fun is a drop in the bucket. And so we're trying to figure out where that pricing was important, but a lot of Concordians do care. And they also care about the messaging on sustainable practices, environmental protection, that sort of thing. So we're kind of in a position where on a positive note, we have some flexibility with our rate structure to get a little bit more creative. We're not proposing a significant change here, but I think the data that we need to make the case to the commission in the future, if we want to change the level, you know, increase significantly more. I think that's our opportunity, you know, and what we don't want to do, what's really difficult and nobody wins, is when you have to be the water police, where you're knocking on the door. Who are you? I'm from the town. I'm here to tell you you're evil. You know, that's never a great thing. And and by the way, I work for you.
Yeah, but you know, some of the automatic systems sprinkle when it's raining out.
Yep.
And that's, to me, that's a very frustrating situation.
It is. And we hear from people who see that. And, you know, that's part of this dance. And I said, I think, why are we projecting a loss in water use over time? Because we believe there is some waste that could be better, you know, mitigated.
Now, Ellen, I remember from, I think, a prior year or two, there's a comment made that our residential average gallons per day was above the state limit, or I'm not sure it's a limit or a requirement or something like that. So that was one of Jeff's slides, and it didn't show what the state says we should be under.
Let me show you. So this is this slide right here.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I'm going to have to go over here just for a second, minimize our audience so we can see. The 65, it's funny, we moved that line. It used to be 65 was in red, but now we're showing an average, you know, 10-year. But 65 is the standard.
Okay.
And what you'll see is from 2017, 18, 19, we were fine. As Jeff pointed out, 2020 was a high demand for COVID and drought and every other reason. Last year was unusually, looks very good, but we went into this season with a mandatory 1 day a week restriction, not a voluntary, because we were doing some intake work at Magdog. So we are at that cusp, and we are on the radar.
Okay.
The state has put us on notice that, you know, we need to do more.
So what do you think the state could do to us? I guess is the next question. Fine us? I mean,
Yeah. So that inevitably, yes, but what they are probably going to do, we just submitted an application for the Water Management Act. That's a permit you get from the state. they're going to give us conditions. And in it, it's going to reiterate the 65 gallon a day per capita. It's going to be the 10% unaccounted for water. These are two metrics they use. But we also do a lot of very good things. So part of your application is, here's where we're on the metrics, but these are the programs we have. Concord has superior programs when it talks about messaging, conservation, leak detection, all sorts of things that we do, but they can say you need to do more. And one of the things they may say is you need to do something on your, your metering system. It's ironic. One of the things they're trying to do for most systems is say you need to go from biannual billing to quarterly, or it'd be nice if you do. They're trying to get people to monthly. Well, we're already at monthly. So what do we have to offer? We continue to try and do all the right things. What we need to do is probably look at, we need to get more serious with our rate structure and our and the rates themselves.
I'm gonna let you catch your breath.
Thank you for taking my time.
No, those are all important. That's what we work with. Yeah. So
A couple more questions. A great breakdown of the costs for O&M and capital under each program. And I'm wondering, is there certain item here or category that really drives the rate increase, or is it increased costs through all categories?
So with our pro forma that we talked about, it's a tool where we have a role, we include it in fact, I'm going to go, it's back, I'm going to go right here. This is a lot of data.
Yep.
But it's kind of in your packet. This was included in the budget books as well. But this document is where we capture all of our expenses, all of our revenues, all our forecasts of what where we need to be, our debt. It's got everything in it. It's got multiple sheets, but this is how we back calculate what's the revenue we need, and then what's the rate structure, and then how do we know, based on Dave DeLong's question on, every year we're looking at, let's go for 3%, maybe 4%. That's how we project. So it's a lot of data, and you saw a summary with a table, but with a chart, but we have a table where we calculate, and this is the most powerful tool. A lot of utilities don't have it, and we owe this to Bill Edgerton and Paul Reinhardt, my predecessor director and the management analyst, where they crunch these things. And ever since we've had this tool, we can justify what we do and why, and the what ifs we can play with.
So is that really telling us that the increase is really spread over a number of different categories versus it's not really driven by?
Not any one category. You roll it up to operating and capital and debt, and you can know where you got to be. So.
One request for next year, I don't know, hopefully one of us will remember, is I like seeing the historical perspective on some of the graphs. And on some things like O&M. It would be good to see what the costs were going back 2 or 3 years, so we can see some of the trends. Which you have on some of the other graphs here, which I think is helpful.
Okay. On the O&M components, you mean?
I think O&M and on the rates and the rate increase, those are all questions that have come up today. And again, you had it on some of these graphs here. You brought up leakage, and I was going to ask about that. How do you monitor that, and how are we doing? Are we up, or is our system in pretty good shape? So we're on the lower end of average leakage?
Yeah, so
like ours.
So our term we use is unaccounted for water. And because leaks are very specific, they are what you lose through pipes. Water system is high pressure, and water has a tendency to leave, where there's gaps or cracks or that sort of thing. Ironically, on the wastewater side, it's gravity, no pressure, and you have the problem where you bring infiltration in. So I laugh, I'm in the business of Goldilocks, because I'm never quite happy, depending on what utility, what weather. It's just, you're never just right. But the leaks leaving the system mean we have to pump and treat, and there's costs associated with that. But we were over the 10%. I think we're at 12% or something this year. We've been around 10, but there is, I just have to say this, the industry is really challenged with trying to identify where is the unaccounted for water. Some of it may be losses in the fact that meters under record or register. The mechanical systems as they age, you don't speed up, so people are happy to have very old meters because, you're not getting more, you might be getting a little less efficient, read. So metering is an issue. Master meters at your sources of supply, what's actually going into the system. So if we have a number of sources. So when you say 7 pump stations with meters, that's the beginning data point of this is how much water is going out into the system. We then have customer meters, so we know how much is being used. And then you say, what's the difference and where is it going? So then we do leak detection. That's where you take instrumentation and you listen. It's just technology where you go out and you listen on hydrants, and we kind of announce when we're doing this. And they find cracks, or sometimes the hydrant itself might be leaking. Just literally the way it didn't seat when it was closed, and water is being lost, and it can be significant. So it's a challenge. I'm going to say anywhere between 5 and 15% is not unreasonable. The regulators are looking at 10 as being their trigger for more work, more activity. But when we do our leak detection, which we do the system every 2 years, we rotate, but it might be annual. We try to make sure we go to all the water mains, both in Concord, under the roads, and listen. We don't have a significant problem, but our unaccounted for was 12% this year. And some people say you need to hire a better accountant because there's only so much you can do in the operations.
So that's based on all those instruments you just mentioned.
Yeah.
This 62 gallons per day per capita residential is based on the residential water meter.
Actual metered use, correct.
So we're actually, more water is going out of our system because there's other users.
Yeah, that's right. It's not just residents, it's commercial, municipal, other users too.
And how do we measure how much water is going out of our system? The meters at the pump stations?
It's a combination of all the metered. So we meter all couple things. Best practice, all use is metered, which is the case in Concord. So these are some systems don't have that. So we already have best practices. Any end use is metered. We calibrate the master meters at each station annually. That's something that we do to make sure that those are not wandering or drifting. The technology is even changing the meters, which is problematic. So how do you accurately read, flows between 200 gallons a minute and 400 gallons a minute, and make sure that, well, where are you on the curve? And are you, this year we were more at 350, and it was a little bit different than when a year you were at 250. It's possible. That's what the operations, we follow all best practices, but even with that, the industry, and I'm going to say, because I look at this stuff, I've had discussions with this with regulators, there are systems with 25, 30% unaccounted for. That's significant. There's a lot of systems that are somewhere in the 5 to 15. And I'm going to say it's very difficult to say, short of best practices, how you differentiate.
So where I was getting one of the reasons I was asking was that if we've got leakage, it's really not impacting our residential use because that's based on the meter in the home.
Correct.
If there's leakage, this annual water system demand, again, is that based on the meter at the?
Yes,
at the
master meters. Yes,
Okay.
at the sources.
It's not a summary of
Correct.
what everybody's paying.
Correct.
And Is
That's right,
that
that's the
difference-
differential, that's the 10%,
That's
that's
the
the
10%.
unaccounted for.
Right.
Some is leaking through pipes, some might be measurement issues from the master meter.
Yep.
Or the 5,500 meters accounts we have out in the system. They vary in size, some are just 5/8 meters, a typical single family. You can have a 2-inch meter, for 3-inch, 4 for Emerson Hospital, depending on the end use.
And the number that the state really looks at, based on the question Jim asked earlier, is the average residential.
Just two, average residential.
Yep.
And unaccounted for, 10%
Okay,
and 65. Those are the two metrics that they use
okay.
as a gauge.
Couple.
Good stuff. I mean,
how-
we're here as long as you want to be.
How are the 6 wells? How are they? I mean, are they in good shape? Are they, is there an easy answer to that?
They're fine, aren't they? No. It's a great question because they have wear and tear too.
Yeah.
So part of what our costs are for our operating and capital is operating to maintain them, just like your vehicle. No matter, even when your vehicle is running, although the electric vehicle is less of this problem, I understand, but most vehicles, to maintain them is a certain amount of cost. And then you have the major repairs. These pump stations are a combination of fairly sophisticated electrical systems, instrumentation systems, pumps and wells and infrastructure, which is specialized. And so we need to spend money on all of these things, but what we'll do is every few years, we may need to rehabilitate a well. And so we budget for a rehabilitation might be for a well might be in the $25,000 to $50,000 just to rehabilitate, to bring it back, to restore it. So it's getting maximum flow. You also get inefficiencies with pumps, you get instrumentation, needs, and the technology where Jeff had mentioned on the security, cybersecurity, some of that technology that we need to do to protect that infrastructure is pretty significant. So all these are the expenses, and basically explaining to the commission, this is our infrastructure, these are the assets, this is what a lot of our time and attention goes to. So when you say, how are the wells on any given day? So I talked to an operator today and I asked him the same thing. How are we doing? And it was, we're good. That's not every day. There's always, something somewhere. But when I hear we're good, and in fact, going into the summer, that's great. We're good means that we've rehabilitated a couple wells. We knew we're losing efficiency and volume. So we restored volume from those sources.
White Pond and Deaconess this
White
year.
Pond and Deaconess. Magog has been conditioned and ready to turn on for summer demands. It took significant effort. We've been limping along with Magog for a couple decades. We never have gotten to that filtration facility that we need. And so at this point, we're saying we're good to go when needed. And so it's an important question. How's our supply? It's always something we have to manage.
But my question was more the yield from the wells, that we do have an undeveloped well. And
That's right.
The question was, do we think in the near future, we may need to develop that well because one of the 6 existing wells is its yield is dropping significantly or something like that?
Not yet. We have been over leveraging our groundwater supply because Magog hasn't been readily available.
So now let's stress on it.
It's
Okay.
all about Magog, and really Magog could have a quality upset. I don't want to say this, that means we can't run it because we don't have the federally compliant filtration facility yet. So we're at risk that isn't available. And if that's not available, sometimes we can get by without it, but then we need every other source running 100% of the time, 24/7. There's no room for any upset. And we need Magog so we could literally have a well on rest or in standby reserve. We haven't had that for 2 decades.
Yeah.
2 decades.
Wow.
And so that's why NADOG is so important. And we've gone through a lot to get and ensure we have the rights. And we went through a lot to understand, the design and construction issues and some real challenges as far as that we're throwing Concord's way to just get a drinking water supply up and running.
How
So,
was the PFAS last year at Magog?
last
Summer?
it's a great question because it wasn't running last summer
I see.
because we had the water ban,
Right.
because we were doing the intake, and we could have fully expected to see the operation in midsummer, in July and August. But July was a flood. I mean, all of last July was wet. It was
Yeah,
crazy.
That's right, right.
And because of that, we literally got, we don't want to hope, for Mother Nature to get us through, but we didn't actually turn NAGOG on.
I see.
And
So now
because of
this
that, we
year is
didn't
gonna be
test it.
interesting.
We did do what you call a non-compliant sample because it wasn't running to the system. We wanted to have a sense of, what is this going to look like? Positive note, it's non-regulatory. We can't report it. It looked good, not great. When we talk PFAS, that's about all you're going to get. It's good. But we are looking at our final design as, do we incorporate, if nothing else, the ability for enhanced treatment if and when? Because even with regulations, there's still saber rattling that even though Massachusetts is stringent, there are other states that are more stringent and EPA hasn't weighed in yet. So people may think they're okay now and the regulations could change. So NAGOG is our opportunity really to sort of look at the future. And that's why it's so important. That's why we're looking at, what the needs are in the short term. So, and Jim is identifying a source that we purchased up off of Balls Hill to protect it 2 decades ago, because it became available. It had been identified as a potential high yielding source, and to protect it from being developed and lost, the water fund did procure this land. It's on reserve if and when we need it. And as Jeff mentioned, we're not just planning for next year. We have to plan for water supply for the next 50.
Yeah.
So it's part of our 50-year portfolio. Hopefully it'll be after I retire.
Wait, I got one more.
Okay.
This is more for Jeff, I think. It's a future-looking question. You talked about the very expensive piece of equipment for the sewer system. For the water system, I know that you need to have certain backup pumps, valves, different kinds of things like that. Have we ever thought about talking with other water systems around us and having each system buy some backup stuff that could be used by any of the others and it will be replaced? Because one of the problems that you're having now is the time it'll take to get something new.
We are a member of Mulwarn, which is an interlocal or intermunicipal support in the event that there were a crisis of some kind. Other members of the same organization could assist, whether it's with equipment, with people, with chemicals.
But
So-
I'm thinking more like you've got a certain things that you keep on supply.
Yeah, that's right. No,
And other people have something that they keep on supply.
Yeah, it's-
So if you knew if they were the right size or the right
yeah,
horsepower
it's
or whatever,
a lot of common. Yeah, right.
you could say, Concord does this, Acton does this, Carlisle does this or whatever,
Mhm.
so that in fact, you could more quickly get a replacement. And then it would be your job to, replace it back to their system whenever time could be done. But that, I think that helping communities out should make it better for all the systems.
Mhm.
Just something to think about.
Yeah, it's a good idea. It's part of it is collaboration, and coordination,
Yes.
and time to even have these conversations, and there are those that, have the time but it's really a big issue right now, with supply side being such a challenge.
Yes.
It's gonna be a major
Yes.
problem. And so
That's why
you're not,
I
yeah,
thought about it.
it's a good thought.
I would like to let the public comment, but Casey, Andrea, and Dave, any other questions before we open up for public comment?
I just had a question about the customer service, the final phase, it looks like people will be able to actually look in real time with the water that they're using. Is that
It's,
eventually, like in the next few
that's
years?
the goal. It's almost gonna be, they can go anytime, go on their portal and see their use. The problem is we're looking at this technology right now. We're seeing that there's challenges with the electric systems and our ability to literally get the read real time. So it's likely going to be 24-hour signals. However, we are even thinking about, and people, have brought it to our attention, where you can go off the shelf and buy technology that's going to connect to your meter and your cell phone and do that, but it requires, it's unlikely we're going to have that capability based on the platform that, we seem to be getting directed towards.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wonder, I thought maybe incentives for conservation can be built into that ability too.
It really would be, that would be the ideal, yeah, so we're trying to evaluate how best to do that. And even if we've talked about, can we incentivize some of those? Can we look at sort of partnering and providing this? Regrettably, in the water industry, this technology is out there, but not when you're sharing the platform with an electric utility.
Oh, yeah.
A municipal light plant.
Yeah,
Which is unique, not everybody has that.
that's right. We get certain efficiencies with it and certain benefits, but that's
Right.
one where if we went independent, we probably have, more of a water customized system.
Yeah. When people pay for water, if you pay a base rate, and then once you get above 301 gallons, you pay more.
That's right.
But then you pay that's the same rate up to 600.
That's right.
So I just wondered, would people say like, I want to keep it under 300, or once they're over 301, they're like, "Man, it's a lot."
No, because every gallon of water, you're paying a premium.
Oh, premium, okay.
And as I think Jim mentioned, the third tier, you're paying significant.
Yeah.
Generally, the people in the third tier will just write the check.
Yeah. Okay.
Any questions, comments from the public? Yes.
I have a question. My name is Mary Hartman. I live at 16 Concord Green, Unit 6. I'm here tonight because I'm the newly elected member of the select board. And this is one of my liaison assignments that I actually requested.
Great.
So I'm glad to be here.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks for
And
coming.
it was really good timing that I got this. This has been great. I do have some questions just as a ratepayer, I guess. When I'm looking at the operating budget projections, do those assume the 4% water increase and the 2% sewer increase? Do these projections assume that? you're gonna
Yes,
have-
that's
okay,
right.
per year or?
Yeah, so every year.
Yep.
We'd have to look at our pro forma. It may go up 2%, and out years it goes up to 4 or 5. But we kind of have these because we don't know.
Yep.
But it's generally, as I said, under 5%.
Okay, but this
Yeah.
year you're proposing.
4% for water
Four
and
and
2
two.
for
Right.
sewer. That's
So
right.
then when I look at the capital plan, and we've got the fund balance, the capital plan, and the debt, and I'm assuming the fund balance is like your reserves.
Mhm.
Because
That's right.
it's your income is greater than your expenses for a given year, you build up a reserve.
Correct, yeah.
And then when you've got capital expenses, you call on that. And if you don't think you want to draw that down too much, you go out and you raise debt.
Correct.
Okay. Have you ever considered in the model that you showed, is one of your what ifs, what is the expected cost of debt going to be? Because if.
Yes, the assumption is 4%.
Ugh,
Yeah, that's been it.
Yeah,
And historically, that was conservative.
yeah.
As of this year, all of a sudden, there's a
Yeah.
change.
Well, CMLP this morning, I went to their meeting this morning, they're using 5.
Yeah.
And there are people that think that that's too low. So
Mhm.
anyway, so you work that in. The question is, you work that in.
We can work, yeah, that's
How
part
much
of the
should
model.
we use the fund
Correct.
balance? How much
Correct.
should we go out to get, okay,
Correct.
that's my question. Okay, third question,
Yeah.
final question. The well that you have, that you're not using yet on Brewster,
Mhm.
and the access to that is Balls Hill Road.
Correct.
If you had to bring that online, would you have to make improvements to Balls Hill?
Yes, the improvement primarily would be installation of water main. There's no
Okay.
main that goes up there. And probably modest modifications to layout. modest, yeah.
Good.
And I will say, it's a really important, and Mary, thank you for A, introducing yourself, and B, I watched last night, I didn't know who was on what committee, so I didn't introduce you as the liaison, but I heard discussion, but I didn't know you were public works, so I'm glad
Oh,
to
yeah.
hear that.
Yeah, no, me too.
yeah.
I requested.
No, this is great. And on the most significant borrowing that we're looking for, or debt, in our radar is Magog Pond.
Yeah.
Why we're looking at potentially a special town meeting this fall is because we became eligible. We're on the intended use plan for the drinking water program, which is basically a cap of 2%. So it's a state loan program. So if nothing else, we get fixed to, it won't exceed 2% if we are able to demonstrate we have the funds for this project. So we're on this plan, which is why we're looking, we need to tell them that by October. So that's why we're looking at a September, potentially special town meeting. And it's ironic because historically, SRF at 2% was, well, the town might do just as well, and there's no paperwork or, red tape.
Right.
Let's just do it, we don't need it.
Yep.
We're very fortunate that we got into the queue before all this crazy hit. And now that's a buffer. Ironically, I tell people, they're all looking for federal money. We hear about all this money. We regrettably, Concord is not particularly high on the eligibility list. For instance, if we had, were, listed as a environmental justice community or housing, I think there's housing criteria. This same SRF program would have probably given us principal forgiveness. It's pretty frustrating. Yes, it's a grant.
Wow.
So I don't mean this facetiously, but Concord is learning what equity looks like.
Yeah.
It's hard to be out there.
Yeah.
Yes.
But the good news is, Mary, that SRF loan for us now does have value if we do decide we want to move forward with this.
Thank you.
Anybody
That
else
would get
in the room have a
reflected
question or
before.
comment? Yes.
Robert, those single league women voters, 102 Central Street. I was curious, when you talked about the gallons per day of 62, if I understood correctly, this is pushing the number that the state would like to have us at, am I understanding?
It's an average number.
Average number.
65 is what the state's limit is, and if you're above it, you're on their radar. If you're below it, you're not.
I mean, looking at Sunbury, for example, maybe a more homogeneous community, are they substantially lower? It seems like the range seems to be very, very tight in there, I guess is my question. Is it as tight as it appears to be?
Yes, for Concord. There are a lot of systems. An affluent community with lots of lawns and property value is likely to be on the higher level.
Anna, anybody on Zoom that would like to ask a question that you can see?
I don't see anyone.
Okay.
I move that we close the rate hearing.
Okay. Second,
Second.
there's usually no discussion. There's a discussion here. No. So we have a
No.
motion and a
Roll
second.
call. Okay, sorry.
Yes. So roll call, vote on the motion. James Terry,
Aye.
Andrea Solomon,
I
David Delon,
Aye.
Casey Winslow,
Aye.
Jeff Passer, aye. With the hearing being closed, any further discussion, or if not, would someone like to make a motion on the rate change?
Okay, yes. I move to approve the water rate schedules and sewer rate schedules as presented and described in the fiscal year 2023. Water and sewer rate schedules memo dated May 11th, 2022, prepared by Water Sewer Management Analyst and issued by Public Works Director.
We have a second?
Second.
Andrea beat you out, David. Any further discussion? If none, roll call vote. David?
Aye.
Andrea?
I
Jim?
Aye.
Casey,
Aye.
Jeff, aye. That was very informative. Thank you for all the input and information.
Thanks. Jeff.
Appreciate it. Next item is the Rhodes Program update.
All right, the question is, do we have Steve Dukran?
There he is.
All right, look at that. Welcome.
Here he is.
Introduce Steve Dukran, town engineer. This is a first. We have a presentation from a remote site in the bunker. I am going to try and get the presentation up, Steve, and you can then walk us through. Give me 1 second. 99 share. Hopefully this will come up.
Hola,
Okay, can you see it?
I can see it and I hope everyone else can.
All right,
Okay.
very good. I think we're good, Steve. It's all
All
yours.
right. Thank you. So Steve Dukran, town engineer. We're here before the commission to present once again our projects regarding road related spending. You'll find it's more of a discussion on budget than on projects, but we try to be equally do both so that there's a good understanding. We have listed here that we come before you quite often in this fiscal year. Starting in September, we were here doing a roads program briefing where we gave general information on our roads projects. If you recall, we talked about pavement condition index, the different pavement management techniques. And then in September, we gave you some more. We gave the results of a survey of the pavement that was done in the summer. And you might remember that we reported that the pavement condition dropped from 78, I believe it was in 2018, to 67 in 2021. And we talked about some new treatment approaches so that we can stretch our budget even further. Then we had invited you to a public outreach session in January of this year, where we presented the selected street projects to the public, and we asked for input. And so you were there as well. And tonight, we're going to be talking about where we are with our current projects, with this year, 2022 projects, and we'd like to discuss what we plan on doing with the newly passed 2023 budget. So certainly we come before you quite frequently. You might say you don't get enough from us, so it's good to hear from us. Our message, which is pretty much Alan's and mine, is we don't get enough. And we'll show you how and why that's the case. And we're encouraged by Mr. Nick Pappas, I know he's in the audience, to keep coming back to show you where our needs are. So I mentioned in the memo that I had prepared that our current cost trending is not really good. This chart, which really applies more to building, but it's the same trend for horizontal construction. Mid 2020, things really started to go up. That's the same time that Concord was using more water on an average daily basis. And so this probably averages around 30% increase over a year from say November of 2020 to this past November, and it keeps going up. This does not show what's happening with the current worldwide events regarding energy, and so it's even higher. And just to put this in perspective, we've received bids recently on asphalt projects, and a ton of asphalt has come in at 50% more than it was a year ago for in our most recent bid. Again, this is not a surprise to anyone. You know, we've been hearing a lot about this in the news. But the asphalt price was quite a bit of a surprise to us. 50% over last year it was gave us a rude awakening. Something that Jeff Morawski mentioned in his presentation, the long lead times. He talked about that with regard to pipe work that may cause a delay in his Butternut Circle water main project. We have seen that with much of the materials on our projects too. And as a result of that, as well as staffing shortages and contractors having a lot more work than they can really do, we are seeing where they're not giving us a commitment to delivering schedules. It's the nature of what the business is in right now, and we just have to learn to live with it. So the other slide shows here, next slide. This, and do we skip one? Can we go back?
Let me go back.
Yeah. The 5-year need. I don't know if I have the same sequence. Here we are.
Yeah,
Okay.
there we are. Yep.
Okay. So last budget round, we prepared our budget, capital budget for the next 5 years, starting in FY23 and going through FY27. In past, in reviewing, what we've done in the past, even prior to me coming on a few years ago, things were approached a little bit differently. The department, engineering division, made a number of small requests that truly did not represent the need. And these small requests were often granted, but just you couldn't do much with that small amount of money to take care of the real need. But on top of that, we'll do a larger request for what we called the Rhodes Program. And that larger appropriation was expected to pay for roads and other miscellaneous items within the street, as well as parking lots. And so we decided in going into the last budget season that we wanted to approach it by identifying the major infrastructure needs and give true estimates and request those actual amounts. So
Steve, I'm going to interrupt real quickly. I'm putting the slide on the it's out of sequence. The 5-year summary of roads is what you just described. This is historically, can you see?
Yes, I can see.
All
That's
right,
correct.
so this is what you were just describing is the bin of money that historically was used to do a lot of things. And it was always hard to sort of identify, is that for pavement? Is that for a sidewalk? Is that for stormwater? What is it? And as Steve mentioned, we'd ask for small money for pavement or sidewalk, or small money for storm. But they'd have to do these projects and they'd have to account for stormwater or drainage when they were doing a reclamation. They needed to add the sidewalk when they were doing this road improvement. So, and this is in essence what the funding level had been. So I think that's sort of the starting point that we're looking for is, and you'll see between the town funds and then the chapter 90s, what the state, gives the town, you're looking at an investment of somewhere around $2 million a year. That was historically, that's our past practice, but that was much more, it included a lot of expenses that weren't as obvious. And so Steve and his team, Steve, I've just gone to this spreadsheet here. You went through asset by asset to identify the needs and investment needs. So that gets us to this slide, Steve. Is that how you want to go? Is that?
Yeah, that does add logic to what you just did there. So anyway, so we put this as a 5-year request for two type of projects. We have the cash projects above, the 4 of them are called tier 1. And then the lower set of projects are to be paid for using bonds. And totaling over $6 million, $6 million to $7 million a year over the next 5 years. You'd see for FY23, where we got a total of $3.389 million, whereas we asked for 6.236. It's not near enough of what we can do, but certainly better than what we have been having before. And later on, we'll talk about how we plan on programming the $3.389 million. So anyway, the bottom line here is we were short funded by $2.847 million. I think that's the last number on the slide, the very bottom. And we can sustain that. You've seen where our PCI has dropped quite a bit over 3 years. Other type of infrastructure that you don't see, that we don't measure easily, like drainage and culverts and so on, those will have to be addressed. And that's why we need to keep coming back and asking for a adequate amount of funding, to start with, as well as to continue, so that we can get to where we can bring all of our infrastructure to an acceptable level. We're hoping that the shortfall of $2.8 million, we can still go back and have the opportunity to get funding, maybe from ARPA, to cover areas like the parking lot that didn't get funded, or pedestrian and bicycle improvements, and stormwater improvements as well. There's an opportunity to get funding from these new federal sources. Okay, so just going back to that slide, Alan, with the 5-year history.
This one here?
Yeah.
That one? Yep.
Yes. So just to repeat, the irony is that, we use we've always been using the pavement condition as the need to get this kind of funding, the 1.3 or 1.2, as case may be, of town funds. And then we end up using that money together with the Chapter 90 money to deal with other types of infrastructure outside of pavement. One more thing I wanted to point out, if you were reading the memo that I had prepared, the last column totals were in error. This slide corrects those errors that were brought to our attention. The slide, the 2022 projects, just wanted to go through it and show you where we are with the project for this year. We have listed them. On the left side, we have the project name. The middle would be the status of the project. And on the right side, the cost. The costs, some of them are estimated because they're either in the process of being contracted or in the process of being developed and being put out to bid. I'm going to run on quickly. You've seen this some of these a few times before. The first few projects are the roadway improvement projects. The phase 1 is the asphalt rubber. That contract is in place and it's scheduled to start this month, May. The second project, the cold in place recycling and microsurfacing. We received one bid that was quite high. We are renegotiating with the contractor, hoping to bring that cost down, and hopefully that happens soon and we can get that into construction pretty soon. The third contract, major contract, is phase 3, which consists of road reconstruction and road mill and overlay. We also received one bid. It is higher than we anticipated. This contract includes the Commonwealth Ave complete streets work. And that has a strict timeline on it. So we're going to be moving forward and we're in the process of awarding that contract as we speak. Then we have a crack sealing contract. That's work has been scheduled to happen soon. I'm going to skip over the engineering consulting, and then we have the 2022 pavement markings. That work is going to be scheduled after the crack sealing is done. And then a signal maintenance contract. That's an annual contract that we do. We have received bids and we'll be putting that under contract for about $30,000 soon. We are preparing a small contract for guardrail improvements. We have a lot of guardrail that is deteriorated. This year's contract, we expect to spend over $50,000 replacing some sections. Townwide culvert and bridge assessment. We have selected a consultant and we are working out their final scope and fee so they can get that work started, where they will go out and inspect and assess all of our culverts and then use that information to come up with an asset management plan and a capital improvements plan that we can use to plan our capital work on culverts. And then we have the Store Street parking lot improvements. That work was started last year. The drainage was completed last year. The reconstruction of the pavement is being scheduled to start in the next couple of weeks. And then Howard Street improvements, which is also funded by Complete Streets funds. The utility work was done last year. If you were out there in the last couple of days, you would have seen where the road was reclaimed and then it was binder paved yesterday. And we're scheduling to the sidewalk work next. And stormwater permit, MS4, that's an annual requirement. We invest about $50,000 a year in just trying to complete all the requirements and perform the reporting under the permit timeline. And the last project on the list would be drainage improvements on Lowell Road and Prairie Street. We're designing those improvements and we'll have that work constructed sometime later this year. The total of $4.19 million shown there, that doesn't mean that we have $4.19 million for this year. That total includes contracts that were started last year, at least 2 contracts. It also includes Chapter 90 money from this year as well as previous years, as well as Complete Streets grant money. The real number for this year's money is around just around $2 million. All right, so that was all the projects scheduled for this year. And for next year, the approved budget that we got recently, we are planning out projects that are listed. I will have to note once again, earlier, we talked about industry pricing is really all over the place. And so therefore exact programming of these projects is difficult to do, but this is what we plan as of now, and hopefully we can achieve the most, if not all of these projects. The first few projects on the list would be the same kinds of projects that we're doing this year, preservation type projects for the pavement, as well as roadway reconstruction. I'm hoping that as we look at our street scan results, we're able to program work for some of our major streets. I've noticed our major streets are, some of them are in bad shape. They do cost a lot more because of having to, the streets are naturally wider and we have to deal with traffic. All of those things will add to higher costs. But I think we need to turn our attention to some of our major streets when we pick those streets and we work them into our budget, we will be bringing that program to the commission later this year, hopefully around September, October, to discuss, discuss the plans. Other projects on the list will be signing and striping, signal maintenance, the same contract from this year. We'll have another one next year. More guardrail improvements. We'll be in our second phase of doing the townwide culvert and bridge assessment. We'll also be doing our next year of stormwater requirements. And then we will hopefully have a culvert or major drainage project that will be selected from the assessment work that will be done later in the year. And then we have received a budget for traffic and signal improvements. We want to use that hopefully on the Commonwealth Avenue and Brook intersection, where realignment of that intersection is needed and pedestrian improvements are also needed. We want to address some speeding issues, as well as some minor upgrades at the Main Street, Baker, and the Route 117 signals. And the last project on the list is what we call our asset management tool. We want to develop this tool so that we can manage all our roadway infrastructure, hopefully using one system. And this budget that we have assigned at $40,000 will be what we'll be using for development of that software tool. I think that brings us to the end of the slides. Oh, not quite. Yeah, we always use this opportunity to educate the public regarding, stormwater management, stormwater pollution, and it is something that gives us credit every time we bring this to the public or something of this nature in our MS4 program. So that's it. Any questions on the ducklings?
So, before I have a bunch of questions,
Please.
a few questions. Do you have anything else to add, Alan? Or?
No, I think, Steve, it's just important to understand what we requested and what we received.
Yes.
I really think that Steve mentioned this, and I'll go up to this slide. It's really our needs: parking lot, pedestrian bike improvement, stormwater. We're not funded this year. People, when they call and say, what are you doing about this sidewalk? We just need to say it was not funded.
Yeah.
It's a difficult thing, but we can't make it up. It's ironic, these are areas that are priority for the town. And when we talk about Envision Concord and complete streets, so there's a bit of a disconnect. We're trying to just educate and inform and let people know where the money is, where it isn't. And we do recognize that, the amount of money that was received for public works for some of these improvements was an increase. But, it's just, the question is, when do we maintain and get our PCI, the condition of the roads, and how do we deal with the other issues? And some of them are regulatorily driven,
Right.
like the stormwater. We don't have a lot of choice. We need to invest in that. And some is sort of quality of life, and that might be the pedestrian, what do we call it? The pedestrian bike improvements. That's not required, but it's certainly here loud and clear that people want it. So
Again, a few questions. I'll start on. Open it for.
shall I shut the presentation? You want presentation on? Okay, on this? Yeah.
So when we did a lot of discussion about the request, the budget request for fiscal year 23 and what would be in that and projecting ahead. We obviously got a lot less than we asked for. When we projected that request, that was strictly our needs. The money we were requesting was strictly town money and Chapter 90 money that would total that 6 million, or was it strictly that was town, the request of town funding was 6 million?
So the chapter 90, and Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're looking at somewhere, there's a 10-year contract that we have with the state. And I think we're looking at maybe a contribution, is it 450,000, Steve, coming up this fiscal year?
Yes, around 450.
About 450. And we've over the last few years, it's been somewhere in the 650, 700. But again, it's based on this contract. I'm still sort of working my way through, but I talked with Steve earlier. The state is yet to reach out to the town to initiate conversations about, where we're headed with chapter 90. So that's
Was that part of the 6 million, or was that over and above the 6 million request?
Steve, can you hear that question? Where does
I hear the
chapter
question,
90
yeah.
fit with the request?
So when we make the request, we don't include chapter 90 because it's not always guaranteed.
Yep.
So
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 then some of
we-
that chapter 90 will help offset some of the.
Deficit, yeah.
right.
Also, I heard that, and I didn't realize we had a 10-year contract. I heard the state was considering additional funding to towns. I don't know if that was related to chapter 90 or if that was other funding.
There's discussion on the formula. Again, I'm concerned about that, depending on how you revisit this formula, whether Concord benefits or not.
Yeah.
I've heard the interest in communities looking at that, but I haven't heard, and Steve, I don't know if you've been direct connect to where the state's going on the funds at this point. It's difficult the way the state agencies are operating these days. They're remote, and they're not operating as they used to. And I don't even know what the used to was, but Steve, can you shine your light on that?
Well, yeah, nothing definitive has been coming out of the state. It's mostly because the way they're working, they're difficult to reach sometimes, and answers take their good time getting to us. But we keep talking to them, and we're hoping that they will give us what the future of Chapter 90 is going to be. They have been focusing on other special types of programs like shared street grants and safe routes to school and so on. The typical Chapter 90 hasn't been discussed a whole lot. With regards to our current contract, it's a 10-year contract that's coming to an end, and that's why our amount is down to around 450. That's what's left of the original amount. We're hoping that they renew the contract and we do get something that's average or more than average.
I know the town's very good about going after grant funding. And we've talked about this, complete streets, shared streets, culvert programs, small bridges, et cetera. I assume, we'll be very active going after that funding, and that may help reduce the gap here between our request and what we were funded.
Yeah, so part of this, really the stormwater side, we're hoping that, I will say we're partnering to get a grant through MVP to do some work on evaluating stormwater and not just stormwater, flood and drought conditions and climate, and how it affects not just Concord, but the region. We're hoping the partnership with the region will allow us to entertain a grant where we'll do a pilot. That, coupled with the culvert assessment that the engineering group is going to do, is we may look at, problems that don't just affect Concord, but maybe upstream, downstream, and possibly parlay that into some funding that comes our way for infrastructure. So that's an example of trying to be creative with the existing playing field right now. Other than that, everybody's trying to chase where the money is. Nobody knows where it is yet. It's still promise, more than real. But as I said, we'll be tracking it. I don't know how it's going to go into Chapter 90. We know on the water wastewater side, there's money, but I think our real opportunity was in the SRF, where that's what we've got. But no, we'll continue to look at the complete streets and the safe route to school. We applied for a safe route to school grant recently. We didn't receive that. That was unfortunate. Steve, on the complete street, we do have is there an application out on that one? Or,
No, the reason why we can't put on application is because we still have an outstanding project. One of the mentioned the Commonwealth Ave. Harvard Street is one of those, but and which is scheduled to be completed, this summer. But Commonwealth Ave, we're still experiencing some delays over there, so it may go into the fall. Not until we are done with that project and build, the reimbursements from the state. I don't think we're eligible to file for another grant.
but all the indicators are the monies will be over a few years. It's not just a one shot. It's going to be, there's so much money, and the administration of it is challenging right now. So, but we'll position ourselves as best we can.
Yep. Yeah, there are other funding sources out there, and I think the town's pretty good. We need to make sure we're being creative in how we
Right.
look at some of these other funding programs, more on the federal level, and they don't always come on the radar locally.
Mhm.
So there's some other things there. You mentioned bids coming in high, and you mentioned the roadway improvement project came in high, and we were negotiating, and then phase 2 and then phase 3 came in high. I'm just wondering, Steve, how much higher? Are we talking like 10% higher or 30% higher?
So phase 1 came in about 10% higher, but we awarded a contract and that's in motion. Phase 2 came in about 30% higher than anticipated.
Okay.
And the actual cost that made it higher were the subcontractor costs. And that's what we are negotiating. Maybe they can get a lower price subcontractor and meet us where we are in our budget, so we can move forward with that contract.
What about 3?
And then 3 came in about 25% higher.
That hurts.
Yeah, and we're not alone.
Oh, I know.
This is an industry, national.
Yeah.
It's going to hit different pockets differently, but it's all going to be hard.
Do we ever do bids that carry over, like the striping, line striping or crack sealing, that carry over for a couple of years, so we don't have to go through the administrative process of rebidding them every year?
That's part of the problem with the budget cycle and our planning. It's year to year, we have to wait to find out do you have the funding and that sort of thing. So I'm not aware, Steve, of us having multi-year contracts unless it's low cost.
Yeah. The only one I mentioned earlier was the traffic signal maintenance.
Yeah.
We've been able to do that over a 3-year period, and going forward, we're going to do the same. But you award each year separately. You select a contract based on a multi-year service. And so the price is fixed for those 3 years. I don't, for larger contracts, if that's possible, I think it would definitely be possible if we had a large infusion of money, capital dollars. But it's something that we can approach the financial director and see if they're willing to entertain something like this.
I'm just thinking for like crack sealing or line striping, if we have a unit price.
So those 2 that you picked out, they are generally not very high. Like for instance, the crack sealing is like $38,000 for the year's worth of crack sealing. We're doing a little better with our line striping. We're trying to do better quality work and more often. Some areas we want to do twice a year, and that's why our line striping is higher than normal. The areas that are not see a lot of high traffic, we like to do those twice a year, because as you know, they wear down in the wintertime, they're non-existent as an unsafe situation. Can we do that over multiple years? If we can land somebody who's willing to guarantee the price,
Right.
we can do that.
Okay. Nick, I'm glad you're still here. I have a question for you in a minute, but I was gonna see if any of the commissioners had other questions first. Dave, do you have any questions?
It's like you do.
Yes,
You said.
you need to,
Um,
someone needs
Is
to
that a
unmute.
thumbs up?
I'm all set, thank you.
Okay. So Nick, I have a question for you. You've got you're chair of a new committee, Transportation Advisory Committee, I believe is the name. Do I have that correct? TAC? And I'm just wondering what types of things you're looking at and how there might be some overlap or certainly coordination between what your committee is looking at and what we look at for part of our, the certain elements within our roads program.
Okay, I think just two things to comment on. One is the maintenance. We don't specifically look at maintenance as part of what we're working on right now with our transportation roadmap, but let's just say if there aren't well-maintained roads, we're going to have a problem with any sort of transportation around town, whether it's for bicyclists or automobiles or buses or anything. So I was kind of surprised that there is this funding gap for maintenance and, disappointed. And I hope there's something we can do about it. But so it's badly needed. The second part, which is more what we're trying to do with the Transportation Advisory Committee, is look forward to what we think Concord, what we've heard from the public when we did the long range plan, what Concord aspires to, which is to have a better range of services available to people. On the one hand, that means ride services, things like possibly buses and on-demand services, but it also means vast improvements to the roads to make them safe for bicyclists and pedestrians, safer. That means engineering and at possibly considerable expense in some cases, and it also means minor things. So, there was, I think it was 385,000 or thereabouts that's not funded at all, which was for that sort of improvements. Now, what the budget should ultimately be is probably much larger than that, but we need to develop the case for that, I think. But yeah, so we're very concerned with both the maintenance so that we can have decent roads and safe roads, but also for the investments in the future for improving the roads.
Thank you. And I think moving forward, there needs to be communication back and forth between both the commission and the committee. I know you're the chair, are you like a designated person to attend Public Works Commission meetings, or you just enjoy the entertainment and tune in every month?
I'm here because there was a topic of great interest, and I at least will come when there are topics of overlap like this. I don't intend to come or ask. There's 65 committees in transportation. Yeah. We went through the other day, and I developed a list of committees with which we need to, and departments with which we need to act from the Transportation Advisory Committee, and there are quite a few. And our next step is to figure out what that participation will look like. I think in many cases, it will be attending meetings where there are topics of interest under discussion, but personally, I'm not a big one for just attending meetings for the sake of attending them. So don't expect to see me or someone here for every meeting.
Okay. And I would ask that it work in reverse too. If there's something you guys are going to be discussing and you think it would be helpful to have someone from Public Works attend, and it's not on our radar, please feel free to reach out.
That'd be great. And then I can stop bothering Alan so much.
No, you can still bother Alan. He'll let us know.
Nick, the question is, how is this hybrid working for you?
Works fine for me. I love Zoom meetings and I love participating remotely. I mean, that's so far. I hope the state extends it in July. I think it gets us much higher levels of participation. I would have had difficulty coming today in person.
Well, let me tell you, you're literally sitting at the head of the table right now as if you were here. So it actually is pretty effective.
Life-size.
Yeah, it's almost life-size. So it's effective on this end. So thank you for attending.
Any comments, questions from people live in the room with us? Yes.
I'd like to make a comment. Alan, you said earlier that this is a priority for the town, the roads are a priority for the town, and it was envisioned Concord, and I think the problem is we have a lot of priorities in the town. In the last few years, a lot of the budget has been eaten up by things like Giroux, White Pond, fire trucks, dredging of Warner Pond. These are big, and those things are falling off. So that's the good news. The other good news you've got going is because of the Transportation Advisory Board, the select board, well, first of all, the town hired a full-time transportation planner. And also the select board is going to sponsor a study, a transportation study. Now, I know it's an overlap with you, but to just create awareness in the community of how this is important, and roads are important to transportation, like Nick said, to just get some awareness, I think you've got a little bit more momentum now than just, oh, roads.
Agreed,
You know?
agreed. No, and it's good to hear, and I mean, this is a part of what the commission's been asking for. It's what TAC and working with Nick, is asking for. And I think it was sort of with the select board taking the lead on, let's do an update on Envision, where are we? It identified all these priorities, but a lot of these, bigger ones, when we talk about transportation, roads, we realized we're not there. Nick did identify, in fact, be clear, engineering division identified budget plans for maintenance replacement. That's it. What we hear in Envision is improvements and beyond. And we got to figure out what, and it's the foundational issues that we need to make sure don't get lost.
Yeah, I think you've got more public, you've got an opportunity to get more public awareness of it now.
Yeah.
This is what I think.
No, and I also know the interim town manager, that she's been very supportive and aware and receptive to, our conversation. So that's been good.
Actually, the other night we voted to enter into a negotiation with her for a full permanent position.
So we'll have some permanent repairs.
Well, there'll be stability. Okay, so there'll be stability. That'll be good.
Thank you. Yes.
Just a quick comment, and very soon, Mary will be familiar with PCI index is the most common connection to the DPW. Those two words are going to go together from today on, if they don't already.
Yes.
Anna, do you see any comments or questions from anybody maybe on Zoom?
No,
Nope,
I do not.
I just-
Nancy
one-
Nelson.
I just want to say that I really like this hybrid meeting. In spite of my background, I'm in the kitchen working on dinner. So you guys, your meetings are really long and detailed and very interesting. So I'm from the Historical Commission, and we've sent out ambassadors or spies or however you want to look at us, and trying to learn more about what you do and how you do it, and have that be a two-way conversation and learning opportunity. So thank you for all this information. And I have a few questions, but I'll follow up with you guys later, maybe Stefan, maybe Alan, but thank you. It's been great.
Thank you, Nancy. And just like with Nick's committee, if there's a topic your commission is discussing and you think it would be helpful to have someone there from the commission, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, we'll do that, I think, because, roads, as everybody knows, roads matter a lot in a lot of different ways.
Yes.
So.
And Nancy, there are 9 of us here who aren't cooking, so just add 9. I think.
Well, there's also a little Chardonnay, but.
That's fine too. Bring it along. Yes, Terry?
Terry Ackerman.
You can come over to my house for dinner if you want. I just wanted to say very briefly that I'm really encouraged by the coordination between CPW and TAC, as we call it, Transportation Committee, and we're going to need all that coordination as we go forward to create the study, the RFP for the study that we really want to do, whatever that's going to be. So thanks very much.
Thank you. With that, we'll call that discussion to close, and we'll move on to the next item, which is the time of year where we look at reorganizing the commission, which means.
Hi, guys. I have to leave.
Okay. Some of us wearing new hats and some of us not wearing a hat anymore. But first of all, I'd like to say thank you to Casey. I understand it's your last meeting with us, at least in this capacity. You're welcome to come.
It's been nice. It's been real nice. No, it's been great. And I certainly do hope to continue to be involved and, you know, before here, I was on the cemetery committee and then I,
Okay.
with Andrea, and then we both parlayed to Public
Yeah.
Works.
Yeah.
So, you never know. But,
Right.
well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's been great.
We're gonna miss you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I was gonna ask if Jim wanted to say a few words because you've worked with Casey longer than we have.
Yeah, you know, she's always there. She's informed. She's got good questions. She's got suggestions, and she keeps us on track.
Thank you, Jim.
So again, thanks.
Thank you.
And then the next item is we need to have a motion for a new chair and then a new vice chair. I shouldn't say new. You need to have a motion for a chair and vice chair.
Yeah, I'm gonna make a motion, if you will.
Yeah.
I nominate Dave DeLong as chair and Andrea Solomon as our vice chair for the coming year.
It's a packaged motion. Any second?
I'll second.
A second.
I move that the nominations be closed.
Second on that?
Second.
Second, okay, and we will take a vote. David DeLong,
Aye.
Andrea Solomon,
Hi.
James Terry,
Aye.
Casey Winslow, Jeff Vassar, aye. Congratulations.
You did a great job.
And Jeff, you did a great job.
It was
Never seeing any of us
Yeah.
Yeah.
before, you know, and running the meetings.
First time we've met, but it feels like we know each other.
And I think everybody knows this, Public Works staff does a great job
Yes, no question.
Yes,
informing us and getting us prepared for these meetings, so thank you to all. To Alan and-
great job. Great job, Anna.
Thank you.
Director's report.
We'll be
Well,
quick.
We got another hour here.
You know.
I have to go in 5 minutes
All right.
now that I've been.
We're gonna go very quickly.
Alan, excuse me for interrupting, but you have something you need not to forget.
I'll make sure I don't forget that. We're
Okay.
just moving things along. So, with that, if we, I'm going to share the screen. We have a few things that will go. We'll hit the highlights of the director's report for you. Let's see. All right, I will start off with just an announcement that next week is Public Works Week, a national recognition of public works across the country. And just to say that, you know, very fortunate to work with, 50 plus very professional, responsible, dedicated employees who kind of know why they're here. It's about the customers and the community. And so we will be celebrating next week. There was a proclamation for Public Works Week last night or whatever, on Monday, the select board, and to acknowledge that. But just, we've got a lot of great people, a lot of talent, and this is our week that we sort of acknowledge that coming up.
We have students coming this year.
This year, we do not have the event. We're still in the COVID impact, but we'll stay tuned on that front. Steve, do you want to speak just real quickly to the engineering?
Yes. Yeah, there is Joe Cormier, very industrious engineering employee, working the table 2 Saturdays ago at the Cooler Concord Climate Festival.
Yeah.
We had other staff, and he performed public education on stormwater management. This is a close-up of the Enviroscape model. It shows how surface pollutants end up in waterways. What they use in the demonstration, they use colored material like to represent fertilizer, oil, debris, pet waste, and then they make it rain by spraying on the model, and it ends up in that pool or pond, like you pointed out. Very well received.
Cool.
Hubbard Street, being torn up. That was the reclamation and regrading. And it's now been paved, binded, and sidewalk and
That was
curbing to
tough
follow.
parking this week in town.
Yeah.
Didn't go out, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Didn't go out.
Steve, we have to say, you gotta break a few eggs to make an omelet, right?
Yeah.
So,
Well, we have a new neighborhood meeting this next week, Tuesday. Everyone is welcome to join us. We'll be talking about striping of this road to incorporate the complete streets elements, especially the use of bicycles and pedestrian safety. We will need support because we'll be talking about a new speedway. Another view of the reclaiming machine. Here is this shot shows some repair over the Sawmill Brook Culvert. The contractor MIG came back recently to do the erosion repair.
so when you say repair, we just completed the reconstruction. And so this is now it's getting settled. You know, this is sort of the finishing work that we need to be dealing with. So, but the culvert is working effectively if you drive by. Let's see, Eric Shaw, are you with us?
I am here, Alan.
Eric, thank you for hanging in there. Eric Shaw is the Assistant Highway Ground Superintendent, as well as the Assistant Tree Warden in town. So Eric, if you could walk us through this quickly.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. So this picture here, obviously, we have our pothole repair crew out on the roads. This year was a especially challenging season for potholes, and we know the concerns of the road conditions out there, but we have been very active over the last couple months with pothole repairs. And there's a picture of just our guy with the hot box, and we've been going at it at least 2 or 3 days a week, as much as possible, between not just potholes, but large full depth patching and paving. So we get to those areas that are, sort of beyond just, filling in a pothole, kind of like you see in the picture here. We'll cut out and, do a larger patch, but we've certainly done a lot of it this spring. I think we're on pace to put down nearly 500 tons of asphalt just for this effort. So that's what's going on here in this picture.
I'm going to skip here, just keep going with the construction. Eric?
Yep, so this is another project that we were working on with the planning office. There was a grant that was awarded last summer to install a bike shelter in West Concord over near the commuter parking lot for the Mbta. We had a deadline, I think it was targeted for December 31st, but weather kind of created some hiccups for us. We got an extension to complete that by the end of this month. So sort of a pretty significant in-house project for highway and grounds to take on, but and we have a couple talented laborers with some construction background who was able to kind of steer the project, and we were expecting to be completed ahead of that deadline. Right now we've got concrete footings poured, significant concrete pad, and I believe they're going to start erecting the structure starting early next week. This picture is our tree planting program. We're out on Assabet Ave. I believe this is where this is. We've already planted, I believe, around 35 to 40 trees. We have 68 trees that will go in the town of Concord before the end of this month. I think it brings us, I think we're targeting 100 for the year, and we'll be very close to that just going through the spring. Arbor Day, we celebrated the Arbor Day event. I believe it was last Friday, 28th. Partnered with Sustainability. This is out in the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail parking lot off of Com Ave. We had a quick ceremony out there. I believe Henry Dane joined us from the select board as well to do a small presentation for the event. But that was our official Arbor Day event with Public Works. Involved some tree planting out there as well. And then our conversation coffee, Justine St. John, our administrative assistant in Highway and Grounds, did a really nice presentation on the trash and recycling program that has kind of come under the Highway and Grounds Department over the past few months. So this is her giving her presentation on sort of what to recycle and how to recycle and other trash and recycling related information.
Going to quickly go up to just a quick update on the compost site. You may be aware that we had been informed by a concerned resident of some quality control issues at the compost site. We provided some information. We didn't really get anything other than sort of a verbal understanding of some testing they had done. And it prompted us to evaluate our operations and understand, what are the appropriate, best management practice and protocols for compost. And given the concerns, we thought it was important that we just suspend, the issuance of the compost until we could get our hands around what are the expectations and needs. Long story short, we reached out to a third-party consultant to get some guidance on what are the best practices, with an interest of what sort of testing program should we employ. And we're advised at that point that, well, really there are no requirements from the state. Recommended that it's complicated when you start testing, and for when, what does it mean, and you got guidance that you don't just start sampling arbitrarily. And in fact, there are no real practices that have been established across the country. We then went and talked to DEP, the regulatory entity, to understand this and make sure, what are we doing? Should we be testing? And got a similar response from them. And the reason is there's no way to collect a sample that is truly representative. Now, what they do acknowledge and what we've learned is compost is a very important sustainability program and interest. It's something that is done because this yard waste has been banned from disposal through regular trash because it's just not environmentally friendly to move this material, haul it, incinerate it. It's just taking up time, space. And given that it's restricted to yard waste from residents in Concord only, and given the way we manage it, and if you've been down to that compost site, it's just truly a really solid job that our highway grounds do. We were given guidance that you don't test because it's not going to tell you anything. It might tell you what that sample is, but it's not informative. So we took that instruction and we decided, okay, best practice, we're following. We called some other communities who also don't test, and basically decided we just give, wasn't so much a fact sheet, but just information to people. We put a news and notice out and basically explain that we're following best practices. We put links to the DEP site as far as what you can and should do, and basically are continuing the operations as it was, but after seriously looking and evaluating what should we be doing and what's the best protocol. And it was a difficult decision to be a part of, because as my background with water quality, we do testing all the time, every day. And in this particular case, when you're balancing what's the source, what are we trying to accomplish, what's the value to the community when you talk holistically and sustainability, it was really kind of an interesting, and I understand, the counter argument, well, just test it and tell us what does that mean and what is it? And so just we've restored operation, and it just wanted the commission to be aware of kind of what that hiccup was. So just in case you hear anything, if there's any questions, they should call and talk to staff. So we'll go to back to Jeff on a little bit update on water sewer, and then we'll wrap it up.
Thank you, Alan.
Yeah.
This slide is a photo of our road borings taking place in the Butternut Circle neighborhood. Road borings is a part of the design process in their preliminary investigation phase. It tells us what the soil makeup is beneath the roadway, if there's ledge, and if there is, how deep, if there's groundwater, if there is, how deep. In addition to road borings, and we did 13 road borings within the neighborhood, throughout the neighborhood streets. We also have done ground survey as well. So we're in that preparatory phase, and we're gonna get ready to start designing the project. Next slide, Alan.
Would say on that project, just as a word of caution, well, it was a plan. We've run into a couple hiccups. One is supply side of materials. We know it might be a problem. Getting the bid out in a timely manner has been challenged because of staffing limitations that we've had. But we're going to, try to get that bid out, hope for, good responses. But we are in a position where if it doesn't happen this fall, it may likely happen in the spring, but we will certainly try to make, communicate to the neighborhood. They are expecting this work. There's a lot of road repair needed. And so I think they're most interested to know they really are on the radar for work, but there's only so much we can control on that. So just as an FYI.
This slide is our portable water fountain that Water and Sewer Division has. The division does support town sustainability efforts by offering up this water fountain, public water fountain. Most recently, it was utilized at the Patriots Day Parade, and more recently at, you have to help me, Muscatawid? Muscatawid,
The new guy.
Thank you. Forgive me. The Earth Day events that was held at the old man's.
This one is equally not as challenging. This is Magog, another.
Magog, and LOX, that stands for liquid oxygen. The Magog ozone site is a location where we actually make the ozone on site, and it's used to disinfect the water coming from Magog Pond. This is a photograph showing the liquid oxygen tank.
Operator, we may lose to a modeling career. We talked about that.
Serious.
He's photogenic. The point of emphasis here is we did on May 1st go into the seasonal water conservation advisory. We are not in a restriction at this point. This is informative. The very next slide illustrates how we disperse that signage messaging throughout the town. We do have message boards. We have street signs, as the photo showed with Dean Strom, treatment operator, lawn signs.
That brings us to the end.
That's the final slide.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
That is the director's report. Do you have
Thank
any
you, Director.
specific questions?
Next is commissioners' comments.
All right, I have to say, I know it's been such a long meeting, and I'm sorry, but
That's fine.
but I know it's my last meeting, so, and I have gotten some feedback from a resident, and it has to do with something that we could go into a long conversation about, but I don't think we want to right now. But maybe it will come up in the future and you'll remember this, but, so it's regarding a $4,400 betterment fee for when you add an additional bedroom,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
When you're on town sewer,
Mhm.
only when you're on.
Yes,
town
that's
sewer.
right. Yeah.
And, but in this particular case, they were just doing their basement,
Mhm.
and they didn't have any doors and they didn't have any closets.
Yeah.
But they were being charged betterment because somebody could supposedly use that in the future as a bedroom.
Yeah.
That's it.
No, thank you.
That's
So-
the conversation.
So it's equally important for the commission to be aware of this because it came up at the select board meeting. This is the sewer
Okay.
improvement fee.
Okay. Mhm.
And so there is a lot of interest because it does come across as pretty painful for those people
Right,
who
they have
are.
no intention of using it as a bedroom.
Exactly.
Right.
So the select board's interested. We'll bring this topic back up. It might be something we'll, let rest over the summer, and maybe in the fall, we'll sort of in earnest, address this. Long history to it. And it's important for many reasons, and it's important everybody understands the nuances.
Sure.
Because the implications are very big. It's directly connected to the town managing its wastewater capacity in a
Right.
way that is incredibly challenging and important. And I will say, and it was called out in the director's report, and I'll just emphasize, we are, one of the permits we're regulated through is the NIPDs. And that puts limitations on flow and quality. And when I say limitations, standards, that how much wastewater we can handle and treat and discharge to a wild and scenic river. We've submitted an application requesting an increase in our permitted capacity. And I did observe, and I almost chimed in on the other day, I bit my tongue, but I figured I'd wait. That was a strategic ask to EPA and DEP, knowing that they may have provided one exception in the state in the past 20 years. This is not an easy ask. This is a bit of a, if it's a Hail Mary, Concord has positioned itself to make a legitimate request to be considered seriously. And will likely, we're looking for an introduction to having this conversation of what Concord has done, how we manage, how we planned, how we're trying to be preemptive and not tripping a permit. But it will likely require some significant effort. And, you know, the other night it was mentioned as if, oh, when we're going to get 200,000 gallons more. No, but it is important the select board is aware of it. The commission is aware of it. This is an administrative process in lieu of multi-million-dollar design capital improvement infrastructure. But I believe it's worth Concord's interest of a couple $100,000 or whatever it might take to see this through, to say administratively, can we make a case that this is in Concord as well as the environmental best interest for everybody? But it speaks literally to that. It affects the homeowner who has that opportunity or desire to expand their design flow, as well as larger commercial operations. And so I've heard it from the entity who has to pay, how painful it is. But when you go to our pro forma, we're trying to protect the needs and interests of only a third of the town, because only a third of the town pays for the sewer system. So that we're not putting a responsibility for economic growth and development on a third of the town.
Right.
So
Well,
it's
that's-
complicated,
Yeah,
but
you can expand
it's
that
a great,
conversation and.
you know, thank you, but
Yeah.
They
Casey,
couldn't count that as a bedroom if they were.
Well,
selling
they
the house.
couldn't, that's the thing, like you couldn't count it as a
So-
bedroom if you were selling, there's also radon considerations, like, unless you have a radon remediation system in place, I don't think you want to sleep in that bedroom,
so Casey, this is to your credit, and just take the opportunity, I didn't get a chance to say anything, but I will. Casey has been a great part of the commission, because she knows the community, and she knows it through a lens of each neighborhood, each home, the residents' interests and challenges, which has always
Thank
been
you.
appreciated.
It's
you know,
good
and-
to be able to pass along the feedback of the, people
Yeah.
that live in the neighborhoods and
Right.
people that are, dealing with the streets and.
And you've always
all that.
done that.
Yeah,
I've always
yeah.
appreciated it, and because again, we're here to serve them.
Yeah,
So
no,
it's
that's
it's
great.
helpful.
That's great, well, I'm glad I brought it up.
Yeah, no, it literally came up as one of the,
That's interesting, I
goals
didn't
and so
realize
forth.
that, yeah, so that's coincidental, but yeah, so, I'll continue to. Certainly with the Zoom
You know what?
platform, it makes it a lot easier, I'll
It
tell you
does,
that
yeah.
much.
Anything else from the
Thank you.
commission before Alan gives us the final send off here?
The final send off, I think is it an action I take?
Yes.
Anna, why don't you?
Oh, Anna,
yes.
okay, I'm sorry, yes, she's patiently, so
Yes.
Casey, with that, we always, so on the, on your way out, we just wanted you to remember that you really are part of the team,
Yeah.
okay?
That's sweet, thank you so much.
You know, you can
Oh,
wear
I
it,
love it.
wear it and think of us.
Thank you, Anna.
and,
Thank you for everything, Anna, too. You've been amazing.
We'll miss you, Casey. You've been terrific. And Alan, can I mention to everyone, please help yourself to a special Concord water bottle for Public Works Week.
There's, you see, there you are. It's the, you're still here and you probably can see it over here, right? So yeah, everyone on the way out, please take a bottle so that you can.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't like to have to put these over my head.
oh, and I see Nick has his hand up.
Nick has his hand up, all right.
Yeah, three things, if I can remember them all. One is regarding that betterment fee for the bedrooms. You ought to look at, I don't know what the details are, but if I were actually putting a bedroom in a house on septic, I might be required to upgrade my septic system. That might cost me $20 or $30 or $40,000. I'm not sure how they handle a case where I'm putting in something that isn't actually a bedroom, but could become a bedroom. I'm just suggesting that you connect with the building department and find out what rules are applied there for those systems to make it as parallel as possible.
When you're on septic, there is a septic review, but it is based upon bedrooms, not additional rooms.
Right,
So the
right.
same process, and we'll get into this, but the Board of Health does that review for us. But we don't want to be in the position of we're trying to gouge on this. It's design based through the health department. They do the review, we just issue a finding. So we have a hand, distance from the actual review. And I will say it's not a betterment. It's a sewer improvement fee that was adopted through town meeting vote. So just to be clear, but the evaluation of what is it is, something that we leave to the Board of Health. The next point is, how they view it is, well, what does it take to create this?
What's the trigger?
Capacity?
What's the triggering event? What's the
Yeah.
trigger?
Exactly.
The two other things. One is
Right, but if it's below grade and it's below grade and there's no closet and no doors, like you're going, walking into a big room like this.
So
Like
we will
that's-
have that conversation.
Yeah, I know, and we could go on
We
with
could,
this,
yes,
right.
and we will, because the select board's also interested in that.
the second one was about potholes. Is there an easy place to report a pothole on the website or a call in, or how do you do that? I mean, back in the day, I would just call Anna and tell her there was a pothole.
Well, you do have her cell, don't you? No. There is. It's
Call, I got the number for you, 978-318-3220.
Alan.
No, that's the highway. You just gave my home number.
Okay, and the third one was about the composting. I think you were probably mostly talking about like chemical pollutants and toxins and things like that. There's another issue. I'm on the Natural Resources Commission, and a big issue in the state right now is jumping worms. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with them. The problem is it is highly likely that the town compost site, if it's not already spreading jumping worms throughout the community, will be at some point. Because what happens is they lay their eggs in the fall, in the late summer, and these eggs are almost invisible, and they're in the leaf litter. And people sweep up the leaf litter, and then the eggs overwinter and they hatch in the spring. And unless you have a compost pile that, I forget what the temperature is, but something like 140 degrees for 24 hours.
The temperature, yes.
Yeah, so it's really, you may be doing the best practice in the world, but that's the only issue I wanted to raise is be aware that these are an emerging problem and they are everywhere in the state already.
Yeah, we were kind of informed of that. And one of the ways of mitigating is the composting process as well, where it creates the natural breakdown, generates heat, which is why we need to mix these piles so they don't combust. But Nick, we're aware of that. It does speak to the increasing complexities of balancing, almost everything. And so what I can tell you is people really do appreciate a place to bring their yard waste at a minimum. And the compost is a nice to do that, we really may need to reevaluate. But it's greatly been appreciated. And again, this practice is just state and nationally considered a very sustainable way of managing, materials. And everything we talk about, especially with Public Works, with our curbside and recycling program, is reuse, sustainable practice. So not dismissing it, it's just these are the things that, you know, are on our radar, you know. So,
Okay, thank you.
Thanks
That's all.
for raising that, yeah.
What
Is
do
there a
they do?
motion to
What do they-
adjourn?
what do
I move we adjourn.
We can
A
get,
second.
you can have an after meeting
they- Exactly,
conversation.
yeah, we can find out about
Second.
jumping ones second.
On motion, we'll take roll call. Casey?
Aye.
Andrea?
Hi.
Jim?
Aye.
I think Dave left. Jeff, I.
All right.
Right. Dave's next.
All right,
But
look
the
at that.
last one was probably.